my parents and some other families, the Blackwells and the Hollands, I think, were all involved in a suit with the state of Virginia, Fairfax County, with integrating the schools. I lived, like I say, right there off of Quanda Road, and I was 2.5, 3 miles from Groveton. But we were getting up early morning, and you didn't have a 95 or 495. So catching the bus to go to Luther Jackson for that 1 year. But they was, part of the argument was all of these people in the county, the state, paid taxes, and why didn't all of the kids go to the school that their taxes were part of making the county educational system? We were told that there was going to be a decision soon. Many in the state of Virginia were not happy with that, Senator Byrd and others. So I was asked to set out a couple of weeks because they said it was real close. No need for me to enroll in Luther Jackson because they knew it was coming down. And I guess late September, I was told I was the new student at Groveton High School. So it was a year following the President Eisenhower sending troops to Little Rock, Arkansas. And people, I know, the older folks in the community, people at the church that my family attended in Arlington, every time I turn around, somebody was praying for you, Junior. We're going to pray for you, Junior. I went to Groveton. I was told that I would be met by the principal and vice principal, and they were going to have a student show me around the building those first couple of days because I'd never been inside the building. And for reasons that nobody knew what might happen, just to have an escort with me. So there's a kid, John Fitch, who still lives in the area. He was sophomore class president. He was to show me around to get me from class to class. I think originally they were going to have I was a freshman, so they're going to have the freshman class officer show me around. But that turned out to be a young lady. And the optics were not going to be what they wanted to have, the one black kid in the school being walked around by a white girl. So John Fitch showed me around from class to class. Turned out the very first class I had, I think, was a geography class with the freshman football coach. And right off the bat, he asked me about playing freshman football. All of a sudden, here it is. We integrate the school, and now we're going to integrate the sports teams. And believe it or not, I walked into the school that first day. There was no police presence or, nothing like that. It went very smooth. Things that we were seeing on the news with the people being beaten and water hosed, the dogs, things further south, that didn't happen here in Fairfax at that time. There's another guy, Preston Blackwell, who was still in the area. He went to James Madison. We were supposed to go in, I think the same day or something, but Preston finished the football season at Luther Jackson, and then he went to James Madison. Preston later went on to become a police captain here with Fairfax County Police Department. But things went very smooth for me at Groveton. Kids that wanted to befriend me or speak to their new classmate, they did. Those that didn't, they didn't. No real confrontational things of that sort. In fact, like I say, the freshman class officer, who was a girl, all of the freshman class officers were female. And early on in my arriving at Groveton, there became an opening in the freshman class officers. And some of my new freshman football teammates decided, let's put Ray's name in for the opening of class senator. They put it in, and within the first 60 days, I'm not only the new freshman there, I'm also the only male class officer. I went on to finish that year, and the next year, I think it was vice president of the sophomore class. Like I say, things went well for me. Playing sports, now that was another thing. Like I say, Mr. Keeley was that geography teacher and the freshman football coach. Right away, I got my cleats and suited up to play freshman football. And the season had already started. The freshmen only played like 6 games, and they had already played, I think, 3 or 4 of those. And then the game coming up was going to be against Mount Vernon, at Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon and Groveton were big rivals. The county and my school were very cautious about me traveling to another school. So they asked Mount Vernon if they wouldn't mind playing that game at Groveton. And they agreed. I later learned that Mr. Keeley talked to the football coach and football players at Mount Vernon, telling them that Groveton had a new football player and they hoped that we would play hard, that we would play fair. And they did. I got hit like everybody else. And they were always taking steps because they did not know. This was new territory. And other places in the South didn't go as well as things did here. So we took it day by day, and things worked out well. Like I said, now I had 2 sisters that went to William Cullen Bryant, which is the building that is now West Potomac. Now they walked to school because it was right around the corner. And my sisters were abused. They were cursed at. They had a pretty, it was nowhere near as smooth as my walking into Groveton. Another thing with Groveton, for me, I had caddied at the golf course down at Belhaven. So some of those kids that were caddies, Groveton had a great diversity of, not a great economic diversity of people. Had people that lived in the trailer court, people military, people in Belhaven that families were wealthy. So some of those guys that caddied at the golf course that were, Bucknell and some of those places, some of those blue-collar kids, they knew me from the golf course. So, when I was there that first day, it was like, oh, that's Junior. I was known as Junior by my family there in Springbank. And so that was a little easier. And again, like I say, people that made eye contact with me, that spoke, that smiled, maybe didn't actually speak to me, but it was a transition that you actually couldn't have written up any better. We had other experiences later on. My junior year, going into my senior year, I was selected as vice president of the student body. And they had the State Student Government Association meeting at Madison College, which is now James Madison. At that time, Madison College was an all-women's school. And they were holding a convention on the campus, and the kids from all over the state were going to stay on campus. Well, when the State Student Government Association officials were told that Groveton's representative was this black male, they asked the school to not send me or send someone else in my place. And to their credit, the other schools here in Northern Virginia, Arlington and Fairfax and Alexandria, those schools, I understand, decided if Groveton can't send their representative, we won't go. And then it was picked up in the Tidewater area. So they decided they weren't going to send theirs. So then my minister and a minister in, well, they had rescinded. They said, well, he can come, but he can't stay on campus. And so my minister and another minister down in Staunton, Virginia, that he was friends with, said he can stay in Staunton, Virginia, and we'll get him back and forth to the meetings there. Another thing after they had worked that out, we were always working something out. They were going to open the meeting by singing Dixie. No, we're not going to sing Dixie with little Ray sitting there. So they didn't sing Dixie. I don't know what we ended up singing, but we worked that out. Later that year, I was also awarded an opportunity to go to Boys State, the American Legion. A guy, Bill Armstrong, who is I'm still friends with. He's a near neighbor of mine in Florida now. Bill and I were selected from Groveton by the American Legion to attend Boys State. And I think the meeting was going to be, or the convention was going to be at Washington Lee or somewhere downstate. And again, they said, no, we don't, we're not quite ready to have Ray come. So they ended up working it out, and the American Legion said, well, the Groveton representatives can go to the Boys State Convention in Washington. So now there's a big reversal. Washington, D.C., predominantly black, Chocolate City, here it is. Now Bill Armstrong is the minority, my classmate. So we attended Boys State in Washington, and we stayed on the campus at Georgetown. And this was in the summer of 1963. We later learned, as history will tell us, that 1963 Boys State Convention, each state sent representatives to what was Boys Nation. At Boys Nation, we see the picture later on that President Kennedy greeted the representatives from Boys State to Boys Nation. And in that same photo from the state of Arkansas was a guy named William Clinton. That would have been some picture if Bill or I had been selected to go and been in a picture with President Kennedy and President Clinton. But there were always some things that we had to work out, work around. And to its credit, the county, Groveton High School, my classmates, many of whom I'm texting or emailing with on a daily basis still, and here it is 55 some years later. So we had lifelong friendships. In fact, I guess it was the day that that same year, 63, the March on Washington. That morning we'd had class pictures taken, the class officers and others, and so we took pictures that morning, and a couple of us got in a Volkswagen and drove over to the mall. And so just things like that that I remember that were good experiences, and now some of us have, as you all are doing now, we're trying to chronicle some of that time.
When you went to Groveton that first time, you were literally the only African-American person in a school of how many kids?
With teachers and kids, maybe close to 2,000. I don't think we had a black bus driver. I don't think we had a black cafeteria worker or janitor that I saw. So that very first day, I was it.
Did you ever have an African-American teacher after that while you were there? Do you ever?
I don't think I had any. I don't think any of my teachers were African-American. But the very next year, my sister Doris and a girl, Barbara Jackson, joined me, and by the time I graduated, we had 4 blacks in my senior class, myself and 3 others.
Did your sisters have a different experience when they went to Groveton?
After they went to Groveton, yes. But that very first year that they were at Bryan, not good. Never really had any problems until junior year, going to the prom. I knew I wasn't going to ask one of I wasn't going to take my sister, Barbara Jackson, so a girl that I went to church with over in Arlington, she went to that prom with me. And then the girl that is my wife today, she had gone to George Washington High School. She was one of the first to go to George Washington, first African Americans at George Washington High School. And we had met a few years earlier at Luther Jackson. So I asked Pat, she went to my prom, I went to her prom, and you know, not like today where you see mixed couples. And then we didn't hold either one of those proms in Northern Virginia. Both times the location was a hotel in Washington. From Northern Virginia, that I was not going to walk in there, even with a black date. We wasn't going to walk in there and socialize with white kids for our school prom. You know, we could have held it in the school cafeteria, but people didn't, you know, so went to Washington. I think the first one was at the Shoreham Hotel in Washington. I forget where the other was, but those were just some of the things that were part of the fabric of our community then.